Hello, Cammy.
Hey, how are you? Good to
Really
see you, Dr.
good.
Cook.
Really good.
Good. Well, hey, welcome everyone. This is our monthly call with Dr. Cook. This is part two of our five-part series that's focused on the five quality of life domains. And if I have it right, Vaughn, today we will be focused on social.
You have it right.
All right. We're excited for the presentation.
Well, let me dive in.
All right.
I'm going to share my screen here because I have this amazing PowerPoint, Cammy.
Okay. I'm
Okay.
excited for this one because I think, social is such a big part of our life, but it's one of those things that when we get so busy, it's the thing that kind of takes the back seat.
Yes, I would say for some people that's true. Sometimes it's your maybe it's your mental health or your physical health or
Possibly. Maybe
yeah.
I'm speaking for myself. I know when I get busy, that's what I just don't
Yeah.
have time.
Um, well, listen, let me introduce you to a new elevator pitch. Um, what we're attempting to do this year, as you know, Cami, is to make limbic art easier to share, easier to understand, more relevant for more people because we talk about things that are important to them other instead of technology. And that's really what we've done in the past. But we're focusing on the five domains of the quality of life. And so, Limbic Arc is a quality of life accelerator that uses targeted information to help the brain reorganize subconscious patterns, improving mental, physical, social, financial, and spiritual well being. Now, those are the five domains. And by using this introduction to Limbic Arc, the next thing I would say, so Cami, let's say I was introducing it to you, I would say, of the mental, physical, social, financial, or spiritual, is there any one of those domains that you have uh, a particular interest in? Maybe you need some help, or maybe you need some better balance in one of these areas. And that would then start a conversation between us, and I could then learn more about you and more about what's on your mind. And then with that information, so let's say you said, well, my social is really what I want to work on. What we will develop, I say we, what us at the company we're building, we're going to build a link that will be translated into multiple languages. And if you said social, then I would just share that link with you and say, Cami, check this website out, check this product out because it can help with social. I think you're going to like it. And you click on it and you go to it at your leisure and it takes you in. So that's why we're developing these new, easier to say introductions.
Great.
Um, and I translated it into Hungarian just for fun. And there it is in Hungarian. I won't attempt to speak it because this is it's a Google Translate. I hope they did it. I hope Google did it right. Um, but here is our logo. And each of those flares then represents one of the domains of the quality of life. And today we will be addressing the social. The social domain is where internal regulation becomes visible in behavior, tone, patience, and connection with other people. When we become more internally regulated, relationships change without fixing the relationship directly. Most relationship problems are not relationship problems. They are regulation problems that show up in relationships. And here's some examples. So assume that you came across this situation and you see these two women sitting at an outdoor cafe and when you look at them, you think, well, this one woman is kind of engaged. The woman on the right, she's trying to engage the woman on the left, but the woman on the left seems to be distracted or a little bit annoyed. And you might look at that and say, I wonder why. I wonder if the woman on the left has just seen something that's upset her, or if she's angry with the woman on the right. What is the situation? And if you then come back in a few minutes and you see this, then you would say, oh, what's changed? Well, if you look at the table, what has changed is the coffee cups have been replaced with the plates, and the plates are mostly empty. And so, as we compare those two images, it's very possible and very likely that the woman on the left needed food and maybe she was hangry. That's that word, it's a combination of angry and hungry. And I don't know if you get that way. Do you get that way, Cami?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I get that way, but it's really subtle for me because I rarely get hungry. But uh, what I do is I either run out of calories, so my energy drops, or I get hangry. I mean, I'll get irritated and I can't put my finger on it until I start to eat something and all of a sudden, oh, I feel a lot better. So if the woman on the left was hangry, I empathize with her. I have the same problem. And that will affect a relationship for me. I don't want to be around people or I'm annoyed by people. And it's just because I need some food. So the relationship isn't about the relationship, it's about the physiology that's going on that contributes to it. Here's another example. There's dad up at night with the baby, and the baby's crying and he's inconsolable, and dad doesn't know what to do. And finally, mom comes to the rescue, and the baby was hungry. He just needed some food. And now everybody's happy. Dad is not distressed anymore, and mom remains a hero, which moms are. So, just to reiterate this, most relationship problems are not relationship problems. They are regulation problems that show up in relationships. So, here is a couple at dinner, and clearly, they're not enjoying each other's company for whatever reason. They're probably both saying, either how do I get out of this situation or, how long do I have to endure this situation? And this may not be an issue of being hangry. They're not hungry and, out of balance that way. This could be a perception problem. And you can see on the bottom of this slide this progression of information to tissue. Um, our new website, if you go to the new website and you click on the tab for science, you will see the limbic arc model, which is a visual explanation or a visual demonstration of how limbic arc works and how information will impact us in significant and measurable ways. And part of that explanation is this yang to yin transfer of information where it morphs into belief, which then creates perception, which then results in an intent, which drives energy or chi, which then moves blood and body fluids and tissue. So the information you're exposed to can actually change your physiology. And the couple in this picture, uh, I am pretending that they actually have a perception problem. So, for some reason, there's a disconnect in the information or the translation of the information that they have received, or, one of them has information that's taken them to a different belief than the other one. And so their perception is different. Well, if you then engage CERT, and CERT intervenes at the perception level. Now, CERT, as we may or may not know, and I'll explain it a little bit in case there's somebody on this call who doesn't know, CERT is the part of the Limbic Arc program that is focused specifically on emotional. So it changes, it seems to have a bigger impact or a more direct impact on emotions. And the circle there with the 12 zones in it, that's called a perception index. And it results in limbic arc from the voice. So when I go in to create a custom info boost or assert info boost, I will talk about whatever my issue is or whatever my topic that I want to be focused on. And Limbic Arc will analyze the energy in my voice and plot it on this kind of a graph called a perception index. It then will show me the three zones that have the most out of balance energy. And so those are the ones that I then focus on with the boost ingredients. And when I then activate that info boost, that information is more specific to the topic that I was speaking of. So if we back up to the picture of the um, couple, and let's not back up, let's go forward. So with CERT, it then broadens their perception. And when your perception broadens, you then have more choices. And you can move past these impasses that will impact relationships. And so now we can see that they are happily having dinner. They're actually holding hands and they're communicating. And all of that could be just the difference is just perception. Sometimes I tell the story about the friend who says something and it hurts your feelings. And you walk around for 2 days just wondering, well, why did they say that thing? It was so mean and hurtful. And then you run into them in a couple of days and they say, how are you doing? You say, well, I'm really sad because what you told me a couple of days ago just made me feel bad and I can't get it off my mind. And they say, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I can't even remember saying that, but if I did, this is really what I meant. And they explain it in more detail, and you go, oh, okay. And all of a sudden, your perception changes, and your mood and your physiology immediately shifts because you have new information and you have a new perception. And that could be what happens with this couple here. Now, the other cool thing about relationships and our social domain is that we are all synchronous. And my demeanor, my internal workings will impact the people around me, whether I am consciously or subconsciously engaged with them. And that engagement, which runs both directions. So the people that I associate with are going to impact me just like I impact them. And it's called, this is when it was discovered, was back in 1665. There was a guy named Christian Huygens. I assume that's how you say that. He lived in Holland, and he had two pendulum clocks hung on the wall, and they were hung on the same beam as these two clocks, as you see in this picture, were or are. And he found that over time, the clocks, the pendulums on the clocks would swing in sync with one another. And usually they would swing the opposite direction, but they would be in sync. Even if he stopped the clocks, and moved them purposely out of sync, over time they would get back into sync. And what happens is the vibration that is transmitted from clock one to clock two will affect the performance of clock two, and that vibration is carried through this beam that they're both hung to. So it's called couple oscillators, and it turns out that this principle is manifest in biology and physics and all kinds of things. The things that we are proximal to will put us in sync with them. And so that's why we tell our kids, choose your friends wisely, because your friends, doesn't matter what you think, they're going to influence you. And if you think you can over influence them, well, that's not really, that may not be the case. So, choose your friends wisely. Um, Now, how that shows up is as we associate socially, our demeanor, our health, our energy, our coherence will synchronize with others, and we can have a positive influence. Have you ever heard the saying, if mama's happy, everybody's happy, and if mama's not happy, nobody's happy? Have you ever heard that, Cami?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
numerous times.
okay.
And I'm a true believer.
Well, yeah, I am too. I remember before I heard the saying, I remember observing that as a kid in my parents' home when I was living there. And when my mom was happy, all of us were happy and doing great. And when mom was not happy, I remember thinking that it was amazing to me that one person could have that much influence on an entire environment. And even as a kid, I saw that, and it's true. But it's also true that at work or in any of our social circles, the energy and the synchronicity of the entire group is influenced by every member of that group. Uh, have you ever worked in a company where you had one employee who was just negative and not a good influence? And when that person left the group, all of a sudden the productivity for the entire group accelerated. And that is an example that I've seen more than once. And it's just a classic example of this principle. So again, relationships are really not so much about relationships. They're more about the physiology that goes into the social domain. Now, also, when you go to the new website and you click on the science tab and you scroll down that page, you're going to see this. It's the foundational hypothesis of the limbic arc model. And the hypothesis is the assumption that we base the performance of limbic arc on. This foundational hypothesis is that actors, and those are fields with agency. And if you don't know what that is, when you go to this page on the website, there's some vocabulary words. And if you look under, I think, 0 point field, and you look under another one, it'll tell you which ones. But you can learn what an actor is. So the hypothesis is that actors can receive and interpret information in numerous forms through disparate channels. And independent of the form or the channel, when applied with a singular intent, will express comparably through known biological pathways. So that's really the hypothesis. That's what we are seeing. That's what I've observed over decades of doing this kind of stuff in a clinical setting and building equipment similar to what Limbic Arc does. Information, when expressed with a singular intent, regardless of what the information is or where it comes from, it will express through known biological pathways, and the outcomes will be similar. So you may have heard of the placebo effect. The placebo effect is a way that scientists try to create a baseline. They try to remove the influence of the subconscious out of their experiments. And so they'll set up placebo controls. And it turns out that the placebo effect, which is just the translation of information through a singular intent, that will actually create an outcome that mimics the drug's effect. and the drug effect is just another form of information. So that's our general hypothesis. Now, what that means is, uh, or what that means in the social domain, is that information, when you apply it with the intent of improving or changing the social domain of your life, you will see these positive outcomes. And in this picture is meant to describe boundaries. A lot of times we have problems with our own boundaries. In other words, we let somebody tell us what to do instead of us deciding what to do. Or every time somebody asks us to do something, we think we have to. And so pretty soon we're overwhelmed with everybody else's demands and we don't have any time for our own. Well, part of your social domain is a healthy boundary. And that's what this picture is intended to show. Another one is the ability to listen. When you are out of sync, when you have too much internal friction in the social area, you may find yourself listening defensively. In other words, I'm not really listening. All I'm doing is waiting for a moment when I can speak again and defend my position. And when we are synchronous, when we are coherent with our internal energy, our internal being, we are more capable of listening constructively, listening to understand as opposed to listening to defend. Another picture here. This is to demonstrate overreactivity. Um, I see you smiling a little bit, Cami. You must.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
We've all yeah, we've all seen this. Obviously, this woman is freaking out over a little bit of spilled water. But if she is incoherent internally relative to her social aspect, she's going to be overreactive. There's just too much drama in her life for whatever reason. And that's going to be very off-putting for people around her because they're going to say, gee, she's a loose cannon. I don't know if she's going
Mhm.
to blow up or, hug me. And it becomes problematic. So limbic arc will help in this area. More coherence will create in us more patience. So this is probably a grandma with a granddaughter, and she's taking the time to teach this little girl how to plant. And if you've ever worked with little kids, it takes a lot of patience. Not everything in our lives is always conflict free. And even good relationships have conflict. But if you are if you have more coherence, you will overcome those moments of conflict more quickly and more constructively. So I do know there are relationships where conflict is used as a manipulation tool. And making up, as it were, is a just a way to reinforce, control over somebody. That's not healthy. And what these pictures are meant to indicate isn't that kind of making up. It's the constructive kind where I may have a genuine disagreement with my wife and she may feel strongly about something and I argue my point with her, but it doesn't get mean and we're willing to listen. And so the conflict becomes a non-issue very quickly in a healthy way. And Limbic Arc, again, can help with that. Love is another thing that we will feel more of if we are coherent in the social domain. Um, Regardless of the differences that we may have with people around us, we can still feel love for them because love is not it doesn't have, you don't want it to be a conditional emotion. In other words, one of the zones in the perception index has to do with being self-critical, and the other one has to do with conditional love. And if you have an imbalance in those areas, that's an indication that you probably are using affection or love to manipulate yourself. A lot of us will say, especially if you're a perfectionist, a lot of us will say, well, if I do what I expect to do, then I love myself. And if I don't, I hate myself. And so internally, they're creating this tension, which is really decoherence. They're creating this tension as a way to motivate themselves to perform in a perfectionistic way, but it's not healthy because you can create motivation for yourself without using affection as the manipulative tool. And again, limbic arc and CERT can help in this regard to help you overcome that challenge and to gain more coherence internally. This picture indicates gratitude. And that's really an emotion. Love and gratitude are the two emotions that I hear about most regularly from people who use limbic arc. Even if they don't observe other things in their life, they will observe that I seem to feel more love and I seem to feel more grateful for everything in my life. So gratitude is another emotion that's expressed that's helpful in the emotional or in the social domain. And the last slide here is connection. You know, we are not meant to be isolated in a dark room by ourselves for our entire life. We are meant to be social and engaged and develop connections. And it really is the connection in life that creates the meaning and the joy and the fulfillment in life. If we don't find it in constructive ways, we will find it in destructive ways. And we want it in constructive ways, and we want our loved ones to have that same experience. And limbic arc can help us with not only our physiology, but our positions in the 0 point field, with our perceptions that drive our ability to connect. We want it all to happen in positive ways, and we want to connect with people who will have a positive influence on us and people we can have a positive influence on. So, again, limbic arc used in the social domain will result in better connections and more satisfying connections. And that is my presentation, Cami. So I
Well,
am going to
thank
stop
you.
sharing.
That was a great presentation, Dr. Cook. Listening to this, I love to hear your stories and examples. And for me personally, I know I need to do more work within the social domain because it's very important.
Well, and the nice thing about limbic arc is you may say, I need more work in this area, but in your case, Cami, you might say, I need more work in this, but I don't know how to fit it into my schedule.
Right. I'm
And
trying to find, how do you find that healthy balance?
yeah, and I think that's the beauty of limbic arc.
Yeah.
You turn on the info boost, and your internal coherence and your field change occurs so subtly that you get what you're interested in because you just open yourself up to it and the universe or God brings it to you. There is, we are built to have a balance, and
Mhm.
we may not know how to do it every time, but limbic arc is a real asset to just bring you what you're after in a way that is so subtle that it's
Yeah,
like,
it's so
oh,
true.
this
Yeah,
was easy.
that's right.
So I think as we share limbic arc with people, we tell them, look, this is not a conscious goal setting application. You do not have to change your lifestyle. You do not have to change the way you think. when you turn on an info boost, your body will just naturally self-correct.
Mhm.
And as that happens, you will notice, if you're aware, you'll notice things improving in the direction you would like them to improve.
Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's always great spending time with you.
Hey, it's great to be here. And I don't know how long we went on this call, Cami. I don't think it's an hour,
About 30
but
minutes.
okay. Well, that was the perfect amount of time.
That's right. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.